Hello, and welcome to Developing Templates for LawHelp Interactive, a 7-week online course presented by Pro Bono Net Capstone Practice Systems and the Center for Computer Assisted Legal Instruction. My name is Mark Lauritsen. I'm with Capstone, along with my colleague Bart Earl. You'll also be hearing from Jessica Frank from Cali, and Claudia Johnson and Miranda Migueli from Pro Bono Net. This course is designed to be taken either as part of a scheduled group activity with weekly review sessions or at your own pace, totally on your own. There is a schedule that will be discussed more fully for that contemporaneous class. If you go on your own, you'll be able to access the syllabus I'm showing here, a version of this, and homework and materials, and recordings of the 7 modules that make up the course. Today I'd like to provide a general introduction to this series, give you an overview of what we're doing and why, show you how some of the parts work and the logistics of this operation. And then we'll get into HotDocs, which is the document assembly tool we will spend most of our time in the first 5 classes. We'll look at HotDocs as a traditional Windows-based desktop application and how document assembly works in that environment. Then we'll switch to how you can assemble documents and run HotDocs interviews through a browser using a service like LawHelp Interactive. We'll touch on the HotDocs software environment and then move into actually developing a template, which will be something you will replicate in your homework after listening to this recording. So again, this is meant to be an introduction to the world of online document automation, how you can construct templates that control what words go where and what positions in documents and forms, construct interactive questionnaires to present the information and decisions to users so they can invoke that document assembly functionality, and thereby provide greater access to legal assistance, both for advocates and professionals and for unrepresented litigants and clients who are trying to serve their own needs directly. You'll see in this course that there are 7 of these classes that'll be recorded, and we've got homework assigned before each of them. So before this class, we would have asked you to have installed HotDocs Developer. I'm going to spend some time going through how that software works. There's a built-in tutorial that comes when you install HotDocs, and we'd like you to have gone through lessons 1 through 4 by the time you're listening to this or shortly thereafter. If you're going to be involved in working with the LawHelp Interactive community, which we certainly hope, you can and should register for our discussion groups, our listservs, at the links that you'll see here, and you'll be able to access through the syllabus that'll be online soon. And also sign up for the Resource Center, which has a lot of valuable material, including most of the materials for this course. And the goal really is to make you comfortable with the concepts, the vocabulary, and the procedures involved in using this kind of software, along with A to J Author, a companion software that's incredibly powerful for creating very consumer-friendly experiences, to make you comfortable using these tools to provide the very applications that we'll be demonstrating, and to go off and create great works of your own with the knowledge you've accumulated through the course. So without further ado, let me just jump to HotDocs. I've got HotDocs running here on my desktop. I'm going to expand it just so we can see it. This is a Windows-based product that is the main authoring environment for the kinds of applications we're covering. When you install HotDocs, it comes with a library of demonstration templates, and we'll be showing one of those in a moment to illustrate some very basic concepts of document automation. Libraries are simply collections of links to templates and other materials. Inside of this particular library that comes when you install HotDocs is a installation guide and tutorial that you can use to go through those lessons I mentioned a few minutes ago. But let's go to an actual illustrative template. This is a very simple idea. It's an employment agreement. So we're working for an imaginary company that's trying to paper the agreement between itself and a new employee. And let's for the moment be in the mode of a user of a HotDocs template. So this is a user of a desktop version of a HotDocs template. If I want to run this agreement, this template, in order to create one for a specific client or employee, I can double click on it or press the assemble button, various ways to invoke the process. But once I start, HotDocs wakes up and I have a new interface. Now, first of all, it's asking me, do I have an answer file? Have I already answered questions about this template and saved them that I'd like to reopen? At the moment I haven't, but if I had, I could reopen and start from where I left off. I'm going to start with a new answer file. So it's going to open without any answers in it. And now I'm into a HotDocs interview. And when you're doing this on your own, just take a few minutes to pause and smell the roses here. This is pretty self-explanatory. You've got questions here on the right in these blue dialogues, they're called. Everything from a text field to check boxes, radio buttons in this case. You can only pick one or the other. And on the left-hand side is what's called the interview outline. This shows you all of the dialogues that are present in this interview that I can jump around sequentially or non-sequentially. So if I want to go to the next dialogue, I can click the button down at the bottom, or I could click it over here. I'm now into a second dialogue in this interview. Now we see a date field. In this case, there's a handy little calendar icon that I can choose a date from. I can also type in a date. I've got yet another multiple choice with radio buttons. Select one that apply. You'll notice I can pick one of these. Off to the left, a little bit of new material here. There's a little icon showing a light bulb. This is an example of HotDocs, a so-called resource. And this is an explanatory bit of text that I can make available to help the user answer this question. We have another date field. I can type a T, by the way, and that'll put in today's date. And I'm just going to quickly go through this to illustrate the idea. We'll make up some imaginary job description with a very careful explanation of what this person is going to be doing. When are they going to start? We'll say, well, they're going to start on September 3rd. And these are a little different. Now we've got some checkboxes which are not radio buttons, but in fact checkboxes. So I can choose one or both of these. You'll notice another common feature of a HotDocs interview. Certain questions are grayed out or missing or hidden until they become relevant. So as soon as I say this employee is going to receive paid seminar days, I'm prompted for how many such seminar days will he or she receive. A few other questions before we can get a document here. Let's say this person's going to be part-time. Notice that upon choosing part-time and being prompted for an hourly salary, had I said exempt, I'd be prompted exempt, I would be prompted for an annual salary. For part-time or non-exempt, I get a hourly. Let's make this person part-time, and they're making $14 an hour, and we'll be generous about vacation days. We'll give them 25 vacation days. So let's see, we've got pretty much all the questions answered. Over here in the question pane, the interview outline, you'll see these icons have changed color a little bit to signify that they're answered. If I had left something unanswered, there's a very slight difference in the icon. It's not quite totally colored in as a signal to tell me I need to answer some questions. You can also navigate around your interview to the first dialogue, to the last dialogue. You can jump to the next unanswered question, and there are none. So lots of different kind of tools built into this relatively simple interview to let me answer questions in any sequence I like, review my answers, get some guidance along the way. The payoff, of course, is I can assemble a document. And here in the HotDocs interview, there's a pane called the document preview. This will now show me the state of this employment agreement assembled for the imaginary employee Jane Doe that I've got here. And it's done various things. It's put in their name in the places it's needed, both at the top and down at the bottom in the signature block, I believe, over here. It's put in the dates and numbers we entered, and you'll notice that it's formatted them in different ways. This one's kind of a long-winded way of saying August 1st. It has included paragraphs that are appropriate given the choices I made. It knows that I said that Jane's going to be a part-time, non-exempt, and she's compensated on an hourly basis. It's calculated what that amount is annually. It's done a lot of things behind the scenes, like taking the paid annual vacation, representing it both in words and numbers to minimize ambiguity. It has somewhere in here, probably near the end, it refers to Jane by her gender, he or she, so it knows how to take the gender of a person and transform it into various pronouns. So this in a nutshell is document assembly. You've got behind the scenes here, which we'll see in a moment, you've got a template that controls this entire behavior. It knows what words to put where, it knows how to construct the template and how to format the answers the user gives and what pieces to include or not to include. It knows how to ask the questions, what prompts to put up, how to gather the information from the user. And by default in HotDocs, you'll also see a question summary, which is a built-in summary of the questions needed to answer the interview. There's an answer summary, which shows you the same thing filled in. And then you can turn on a variable sheet. That's not there by default, but if you go to the View tab, you'll see here that this is something you can turn on. I recommend you do. And then this will show you what are the moving parts, what are the variables behind the scenes. What are they called in HotDocs? What types are they? We have texts and we have multiple choice. We have dates. We have numbers here, these number twos. What is the prompt the user is seeing when they are presented with that question? What answer have they given? So in a nutshell, that's a quick look at a HotDocs desktop assembly experience as an end user. A few things to show you that I've got called out in our syllabus. If you come to a multiple choice like this, company representative, which is a radio button, and for some reason you say, wait a second, I checked that without thinking, I'm really not sure of the answer. I don't want to leave any of these checked. But you try checking away and you can't uncheck it. There's a built-in, if you just right click, you can erase your answer. Something very similar happens in the online mode, we'll see in a moment. So that's a tip that's useful in case you're frustrated by your inability to clear an answer. Let's say we're happy with our answers here. I'm going to finish. Now, upon finishing, HotDocs is going to do a couple things. One, first of all, it's going to say, wait a second, you answered questions. Did you intend to save your answers? So answers have been changed during this session. This is a new answer file. Do you want to save them? We'll say, yeah, I want to save them, and we'll call them Jane Doe 2018. And I've got quite a collection of answer files I've saved. That's now tucked away on my file system, so I can recall it, and I will do that in a second. And then I've also got my assembled document. So it's taken the liberty of constructing this document no longer in a preview and putting it out into a Word document, in this case, that I can edit, save, and negotiate. Notice I left the company representative unanswered, so my assembled document has asterisks by default and the name of the variable in lieu of that. I'm just going to throw this document away and not bother saving, because I can go back to HotDocs and I can go to my employment agreement template, and this time I can go, let's use those answers I just saved. So everything is now back the way I want. I can now say Ed Walters is going to be the company representative. I finish. I'm going to save it with my latest changes, and now voila, instantaneously I've got a new version of my employment agreement with Ed Walters in it. So you can see how it's easy to go back and forth. You're saving a lot of time, you're assuring consistency, and you can both preview the document while you're working in the interview, and you can assemble it at the end. That's the most common form of document assembly that HotDocs supports, namely interacting with Word style or WordPerfect textual templates. But you'll see and learn that there are other kinds of templates as well. I'll just show you quickly. In the very demonstration templates library you get when you install HotDocs, there's an example of a PDF template. So this is a little bit different. It's got a different icon. When you run one of these guys, and I thought to press the assemble button this time, you'll see you get a very similar interview experience. Once again, familiar combinations of checkboxes and fields, something new and different. This is a spreadsheet, for instance, for listing multiple beneficiaries. But in this case, once you want to see the document you're assembling, it's no longer a word processing document, it's a PDF. It's a graphical form where these fields are just put on top of an underlying form. And we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of these kinds of applications on LawHelp Interactive for court forms and other kinds of graphical documents. And in class number 3, we'll be doing a look more deeply into how you construct these kinds of templates, PDF templates. But for now, I'm just going to put that away, just to mention that's an available process. So that in a nutshell is how HotDocs behaves on the desktop. Now, of course, the spirit of this course is to show you how to do the same thing in an online environment. So let me go to my browser. Here I am. This is the main LawHelp Interactive website. We've got a number of copies of that, the very employment agreement running on LawHelp Interactive. I happen to have one right here. You access it through a link like this. This could be living on your statewide website or some other launching pad. But I'll just go and I'm going to run that as though I was coming to it for the first time. And now LHI, LawHelp Interactive, is being invoked to present me an online experience that's going to be very similar to what you just saw on the desktop. But the advantage, of course, is this is now running through a browser over the internet, and this could be somebody anywhere in the world without any copy of HotDocs on their computer, whether it's a Mac or a Windows PC or a smartphone or a tablet. As long as they've got a browser that's compatible with LHI, they can access it. And now I'm just going to show you quickly the similar experience of using that very same kind of a template. You need, since I'm not logged in, I am just going to have to accept the standard terms of use. I can establish an account and normally would and log in if I were intending to save anything. And now here we are. We've got that very same experience in employment agreement. Everything looks and feels quite similar. You've got an interview outline on the left. You've got dialogues on the right. You can answer questions. I'll just answer a few. And I'll show you similarly. You've got the light bulb icon, so you can see how resources look. A little bit different, a little more modern in some respects from the desktop, but functionally essentially identical. This one does not have document preview enabled, but you can enable document preview in these interviews as well, and then there'll be a button here that lets you see your document as you are answering questions, should you desire your users to have that. And when I finish now, it'll remind me of unanswered questions. It takes me to a place on LawHelp Interactive where I can save my answers just like I could at the desktop. In order to do that, I need to log in, which I am not. Or I can download my assembled form. In this case, it's going to be a Word document. And so very similarly now, I'm being prompted to download this employment agreement. This again has been constructed, assembled on the server, not on my desktop, using a template that came from this desktop environment. And I'm back to the same place I was a few minutes ago, again without having to have a copy of HotDocs installed. And that again is the main power of online document assembly. You can present these kinds of interviews, these documents, whether it's for a divorce proceeding or a protective order or a bankruptcy proceeding or a defense to an eviction or any imaginable kind of legal procedure that you or your clients or users want to use. you can make them available interactively through a site like LawHelp Interactive. A few other things here. Let me put this away for a second. While you're authoring in the desktop environment, you can um, actually see what your template will look like should someone put it up on a web server. So if you go here, you can test in browser, and I believe I have this set up properly. Now here I am still on my desktop, however, and I'm emulating what this template looks like if and when it were to be uploaded onto a web server like it just was. So this is a handy process to be aware of. In fact, it's highly recommended while you're developing these kinds of applications that you test your applications not only in this desktop mode but in this emulation mode where you're emulating a browser experience. One other important thing to mention is that the desktop HotDocs and the online mode are extremely compatible, but there are a few features that you can do in the desktop but not do on the browser, either because they're irrelevant or just not technically feasible. So while you're in HotDocs, you can always go to Help, and I'm just going to give you a quick peek. We'll come back to Help more in a later lesson. But one section I'll draw your attention to here under Publishing Templates, Publishing Server Templates. There are two modules in the help system that explain some of the features that are not allowed in server or online cloud-based modes of using HotDocs. Most of these are ones you would never consider using, but they're pretty obscure, but be aware that they're here. Clauses are probably the most common ones to be aware of. We don't promote those for LawHelp Interactive for that reason. And then there are some features that behave a little differently in the online mode. And again, as you go through and learn more about how HotDocs works, spend time in the help system and spend time particularly in this server versus desktop comparison section that I've just shown you. I'm going to spend a little more time on HotDocs and then we'll stop and actually do some template creation. So HotDocs, we're looking at HotDocs Developer. This is again the authoring tool that you can purchase from HotDocs Corporation, now part of Abacus Next. It's the full bore of HotDocs functionality. There are significant legal services discounts you can access to get a copy. And this is where you'll do your HotDocs template development work. There's also a product called HotDocs User, which is just for consuming HotDocs templates on a desktop. So if you're living in a pure desktop world and want to have some of your colleagues run your templates, you could potentially have HotDocs User. There's something called HotDocs Player, which is a special version of User that's only out there to be used with published content from a legal publisher. You probably want to counter that, but you may hear that word. HotDocs Server is the web-based version that we're using on LawHelp Interactive. That's the one that can run in the cloud, can run up on a web server, and provide this functionality out to users without them having to have any installation of HotDocs. There's also what's called HotDocs Automator. So if I'm looking at a graphical template like this life insurance application I showed you before, if I edit that guy, it takes me into a collateral companion program called HotDocs Automator, and we'll get into that in class number 3. But that's really a very rich environment that's used to automate and edit these graphical templates and to control the fields that appear on top of the underlying boilerplate and the behavior. So Automator is maybe part of your life if you're doing those kinds of forms at some point. Developer is really the home base. HotDocs is installed like most Windows applications as part of your main drive, presumably your C drive. We have a handout for this session that has materials and homework, and this includes a list of all the kinds of files that play into the world of HotDocs. So for every template, you've got a template file of some sort, either RTF or DocX, or sometimes PDF. You've got what are called component files, which hold the componentry. This will all make more sense as we start digging into this. There's library files that control the libraries we've seen, Answer files have got their own special extension, and so you can peruse this at your comfort. While you're in a HotDocs authoring environment, you can go and right-click on any one. So if we want to say, where does this, let's see, where does this template exist on my file system? So if you right-click and go to Template, now you'll see in a second, Windows Explorer will open, and here it is. This is the demo employment agreement. That's the RTF is the template file. There's a demo employment agreement CMP file as well that has the corresponding variables and prompts and resources and other pieces of material. Another concept to mention quickly, and we'll get into it in more detail later, up here in the HotDocs developer environment, we have a menu like many Windows applications. Under Tools, there's a button called Options. And this is where you can control how your HotDocs developer environment works and change settings. We generally recommend that you minimize the changes you make here, just because it's better to have your environment be similar to the standard environment when you reach out to other people for help and support. But there are a few things we will tell you to control and adjust here and recommend. And in any event, you should spend some time understanding the possibilities, what you can and can't control about how HotDocs behaves in its various modes, and where various files live. This tells you, here's where the program files are, here's where the libraries are stored, here's where your templates are stored by default, and unless you override it. So in order to be an effective HotDocs developer, it's good to have a decent intuition about what files are being stored where. While I'm here, I'll mention this one. This is how you manage answer files. By default, HotDocs uses what's called its own answer file manager. We recommend you just turn on Windows Explorer. It makes it a little easier to find and interact with your answer files. So with that, I'm going to stop this first segment of our recorded course. I'll come back to you in a bit in part 2 of week 1, and we'll deal with the actual creation of variables and prompts and the creation of a library and a template.